Hey everybody, this is Victoria, your dog guru, and today we're picking a new topic, one that was recently suggested by one of our listeners. So the title of this episode is going to be My Dog is Antisocial and I'm Becoming the Neighborhood Pariah. I feel like this topic is really relatable because either your dog is antisocial or your neighborhood is filled with dogs that are antisocial, or maybe you're somewhere in the middle. So regardless of if your dog is antisocial or a dog in your neighborhood is antisocial, I'm going to give you guys some tips and identifiers so you can figure out where your dog falls in the spectrum of socialization and what could be triggering the things that just drive you nuts. Them not listening, them barking a lot, lunging, even bad leash behavior and how that can play into things. So let's get into it. The first thing you need to identify is why your dog is barking. Why on a walk they are shifting a lot, they can't focus on you, whatever the case is. For some dogs, it's as simple as they haven't been socialized from the get-go. This can be puppies, this can be adult dogs. One of the main mistakes I see that people make is, okay, well, I'm going to socialize my dog by bringing it to a dog park. Let me tell you why that's a bad idea. First of all, if your dog is truly antisocial, bring him to an environment where he's going to be forced to be social with no confines and no restrictions, and some other dogs that could be teaching him some bad traits. You're also losing a key opportunity to give them feedback. Your dog is not necessarily going to be social enough to enjoy a dog park anyway. Just like people, there are different levels of how social a dog is and how emotionally flexible they are. So taking them to a dog park is one of the worst things you can do to, quote, socialize your dog. Result in your dog either being the butt of the joke and a whole pack of dogs going after it because they also recognize he's antisocial, or terrifying your dog to the point where what started as just general anxiety around strange things or strange dogs is now a full-blown anxiety attack for them. First, you need to identify what your dog is actually reacting to. Is it strange environments? Is it strange people? Is it strange dogs? Is it hearing a foreign noise, something they typically wouldn't hear at home? And then you need to gauge what your dog's reactivity level and threshold really are. Once you identify the triggers, it's time to start figuring out how bad is it when it happens. What I mean by that is, are they lunging at the leash? Are they trying to dodge and go back home? Are they just barking a lot? Are they baring their teeth? Do they look like they want to eat whatever it is? You need to know how deep this goes and how strong the response is so that you can start working it backwards. First up, I'm going to talk about dog-to-dog antisocial behavior. This is for those of you who every time you encounter a dog, there is a bark fest or the dog is lunging, what have you. Before tackling a problem like this, you really need a foundation of basic obedience for you to be successful in working them away from this particular issue, because there are several levels of understanding the dog needs to achieve. For example, they need to be able to look at you on cue, they need to be able to sit on cue, and a good loose leash walking history is always helpful. And a solid stay would be great. So those are the skills that I would start before I ever try and work a trigger. And this goes for anything from an anxiety-based trigger to an aggressive response, because often most aggressive responses are fear-based. A good way to know if your dog is really ready for this is, can you walk in front of your house and up and down the street when there's no one around and have them obey these cues? If not, practice the cues, start in the house, then do it in the yard, and then take it on the road. When you are ready to take it on the road, pick a time of day where there isn't going to be a lot of traffic, where you're pretty consistently seeing nobody walking out with their dogs, and you can kind of trust that the environment will be a little bit more stable. I would practice getting your dog to sit and look at you, giving you eye contact, stopping them, having them sit, and then feeding them out of your hand. And the reason I want them to know that is when a dog actually shows up and they're about to go bonkers, I've already set up a system where I'm asking them to sit, I'm asking them to look, and they're expecting a reward. Getting your dog's attention is really key with all of this, because at first, before they can be tolerant of a new stimuli and or breaking through the history of an old stimuli, something that you know for sure they're going to react to, without your sit, without your look, and without some leash work, you're going to be lost in the shuffle. You're basically wasting your time. And you're building up bad history. The more opportunities a dog has to fail without the proper education, the more times they're going to fail you. I've said before, this isn't the dog's first choice necessarily, but without a language with you, without consistency, you're just not going to get there. Okay, so say you have those things together. Your dog is walking with you on a leash, following your lead. They're sitting on cue. They're giving you eye contact when you ask for it. You've set up a system where after all of that, they get some treats. Now it's time to rewrite history a little bit. You can only build forward if you're not in a rush to do it. I think too many people jump the gun and they overestimate their skill set or the dog's skill set, or both. So just be sure that when you're ready to attempt something that's obviously more difficult for the dog, that you feel confident that they will respond when you ask how you ask. The next step is determining your dog's threshold. And what I mean by that is, how far away do you have to have Fido for him to not care about whatever it is he's upset about? If he's got a strong prey drive and he's barking every time he sees the neighbor cat take off, how far away does he have to be from the neighbor cat to pass by it peacefully and act like it isn't there? For some dogs, this can be what may seem like a football field away. I've seen dogs that are so reactive that if they catch a glimpse of a dog all the way at the other end of the street, they start going crazy. So you have to determine how far away you and your dog have to be for them to be tolerant of the unsavory stimuli. Be honest with yourself. If it is all the way down the street, that's okay. You can always walk yourself closer and work closer, given some consistency of a better behavior, of better choices. Don't put them 10 feet away from the other dog if you know that's going to set them off and you're not going to be able to get their attention and bring them back to you. There's no shame in taking it slow. So at whatever distance you start at, go ahead and ask your dog to sit, ask them to look, and then start divvying out treats. And I mean super consistently. I've actually fed dogs out of my hand when they had huge triggers, violent triggers. And this one technique can really start changing the way their brain and body react to things. Food overrides the panic responses in the brain, and it starts sending a pleasurable message rather than a flight or fight response. Now, I know what you're thinking. If you have a dog that's super nervous around new things or new dogs, people, whatever it is, you're saying to yourself, well, they won't take the cookie. They won't bother eating out of my hand. For you, I have a solution. So when your dog is experiencing something you knew previously was nerve-wracking for them or upsetting for them, go ahead and when they're in their sit and they're giving you eye contact, start petting them. This is a way to start getting them comfortable and release some of those same pleasurable receptors within the brain, but it's also a way to communicate non-verbally. I never recommend when a dog is acting out, shifting around and super nervous, that you ever reward that behavior with food, praise, petting, nothing. That can actually reinforce the problem that you're seeing and really intensify it over time, because you're saying to your dog, oh, it's okay to be stressed. Oh, it's okay to freak out. And it's not. But if your dog is sitting and holding that sit and they're giving you eye contact, that's an excellent opportunity to say, you know what, good job. This is what I want. And you're marking a new response. For dogs that are skittish and they're trying to bail to go back home, you might be working at quite a distance for a while. I would spend at least a few days up to a week working at a specific distance wherever their threshold is and start getting that consistency. And until they're willing to eat out of your hand, Don't attempt to close that distance between you and the cat or you and the other dog, whatever it is they're reacting to. You have the dog's whole life to get this right, and while I understand it's a priority to fix it as soon as possible, dogs do not work instantaneously. I've said before, and you'll hear me say this a lot, it is a process. It takes patience. But sending the right information, once you get going and they are building and you're seeing that they're less stressed from the other end of the street, then you know you're clicking into the right information. There's another technique that you can utilize in this process. Say that they're super hyper-focused and you know that they're about to bark at whatever it is that sets them off. You can utilize a technique called body blocking, where you go ahead and ask them to go into a sit position. If they are unable to respond, you can always gently put pressure on their bums so that they start going into the position and work from there. But body blocking is something that I've done with dogs that were super aggressive. I asked them to sit. If they didn't respond when I asked, I would gently push their bums down, very gently. I'm not here to be aggressive with the animal. I'm not here to force them. I'm here to help and guide them into the right choices. Then I'd go ahead and take a step in front of them so that I am now a wall between whatever it is that they're going to react to and them. At which point I'd also ask them to give me eye contact. I'd say, "Fluffy, look." And the moment Fluffy's eyes flickered up to me, I'd praise them, I'd rub them down, I'd tell them what a good job they're doing. And then if they're super reactive, I'd give them a break. I'd walk further away from the scary stimuli, which gives them a break, but it also gives them time for their brains to catch up to what just happened. I've changed the dynamic that they're expecting. A lot of times when we have a reactive dog, we just try and get through it, and we hurry up and we walk faster, and we just keep telling the dog, no, knock it off. Well, you're not telling the dog what to do instead, and that's one of the main problems. You're not giving them enough feedback on what they should be doing in lieu of what they've chosen to do. Also, if you start anticipating a dog freaking out, your body language is going to translate all the way back down to your dog. So if you are always worried about what's going on and you're super hypervigilant, they're going to key into that mentality and those emotions, and a lot of dogs will become protective of you, or it intensifies their anxiety. So it's going to feel a lot like a plane without a pilot. So start thinking about what you could be doing that's sending the wrong message to your dog. Do you see the dog down the street yourself and start your eyes got wide, your heart rate jumps, things like that? If that's the case, stop right where you are. Ask the dog to sit, take some deep breaths, and then work forward. If you've already determined the threshold and you're well within that, then go ahead and stop where you are. Again, take a few breaths. Don't rush the dog, because you're not going to get anywhere. Another tip about this that I always recommend is looking forward, not down. The more attention you point down towards your dog who's already making the wrong choices, the more attention you're giving to the problem. Leaders lead. They don't look down. They don't look back. The pack follows. And pack mentality is something that dogs still key into. They're very social, and social interaction, the mood of the dogs around them and the people around them can play a large role in how they are responding. So eyes forward. Okay, now assume that you've gotten to the point where you can be a street's width distance apart from whatever it is they previously were freaking out about. And you're getting the eye contact, and they're sitting, and you're really feeling like they're keying into you when you ask. Now you can focus on closing the gap. So how much closer should you go? I say add 10 feet. If you feel like there's no change in their personality and you're still getting out of them what you were getting out of them before, maybe a couple of houses worth of a distance, and then work from there for a week. Now, I know what you're thinking. What if my neighbor is still approaching? Which I think is an excellent question. If your dog isn't to a point where you can be about 30 feet away from the problem or 20 feet away from the problem, I always say once you've gotten the response you need from a distance, go ahead and turn around and walk back home. When it feels like your dog is sitting and relaxing during the process, then you can focus on working closer to the stimuli, which I still would limit to at least 15 feet at first. Let them pass by while your dog is in an isolated position. If your dog doesn't want you to pet them, they're not holding their sit, they're not eating out of your hand, you are too close to the stimuli right now. Don't give up, but back yourself up a little further so that there's a bigger berth that the other dog can pass by. If someone tries approaching you and they say, my dog is friendly, let's just let them meet and be friends. Let me tell you right now, that's a bad idea. It's a bad idea for lots of reasons. First of all, any dog can bite. Doesn't mean that they're an aggressive dog, but I've seen the nicest of dogs end up biting because they feel threatened. So this is where you have to stand up and be a leader and guide the dog into the right response, which means saying to the neighbor, you know what, my dog's in training, maybe another time. Your dog doesn't have a voice. Well, not in the way that we do. And sometimes we have to stand up and say, you know what, this is going to be too much for them. It's not going to go well. For the more persistent neighbor, I would actually stop what I'm doing and go home. Because all the progress that I'm making and attempting to get out of the dog could be erased in a single moment. And not all bad interaction ends with a bite. Sometimes it could be another dog that's more dominant than yours, and they start some dominating body language, and that could be a huge turnoff to your dog, especially if they're an anxiety case. More so if they're dominant themselves. It's like dynamite in a match. You're just waiting for the show to go off. Signs of stress. So I want to talk about these for a second, just because maybe you don't know when your dog is sending you a message that it's too much. Excessive panting, licking of lips, ears in a position that is not forward. If you see your dog kind of leaning forward on his front paws, that's a really defensive form of body language. He's telling the dog at a distance, because dogs are super visual, he doesn't want them to approach, and he's ready if they come near. If your dog's whining, this is also an indicator that they're stressed, which a lot of people know that. But what you don't want to be doing in that time, which I mentioned a little bit earlier, is tell them it's going to be okay. Just ignore it. Be nonverbal. Only be verbal when they're doing something you want. And you can use that body blocking technique to start breaking up some of that anxiety and interrupting the behavior as it's happening, which is a great opportunity for you to ask them to sit, look, and then rub them down. Build a new history, a better history, and you don't want to add insult to injury. A couple other signs of stress. One that I see in dogs that are uncomfortable, not confident in themselves, they'll raise up the hair on the back of their neck. And while I've seen some people think that this is amusing, it's actually a really negative sign. It's a defensive mechanism. It's a visual representation of saying, you know what, stay away, I'm a big boy. I think it kind of goes without saying that growling is obviously a sign of stress also. Tail tucking is another somewhat obvious one, but a lot of times people think if a dog's tail is wagging that they're in a good mood. But actually, tail wagging just signifies arousal, and that could be good arousal and it can be bad arousal. So tail wagging doesn't mean they want to be friends. As you gain some confidence and some handling skills, that's when you can really focus on closing the gap between you and the other dog. But that doesn't necessarily mean that your dog wants to be friends with every dog it sees. But tolerance is what you should be shooting for right now. If you have some specific questions about how to train this process and how to start over if you have a history of bad behavior, go ahead and post them below and I'll answer them as best I can. You can also send me a personal message if you'd prefer to do it that way. Thanks for your time, and keep the questions coming. Who knows, they could be the topic of our next show. As always, this has been Victoria, your dog guru.